All right, we're live.
We're live?
We are live.
Well, hello, United States of America. Welcome to the Uninsured podcast with myself, John Lipton, and my brother, Brett Lipton.
We are coming to you from New York and Florida. And although we are licensed insurance brokers, we do urge you not to misconstrue anything that you hear as direct advice for your specific operation or as legal advice. So please consult your insurance professional regarding how any of these topics or concerns apply directly to your operation.
And for any legal matters, please refer to your attorney for legal advice. So again, my name is John Lipton. I'm a licensed property and casualty broker. I am a certified insurance counselor. I am a construction risk insurance specialist. I've been doing this for 25 years. And my brother will introduce himself.
My name is Brett Lipton. I've been in this industry for well over 2 decades. I specialize primarily in product liability insurance, everything from chocolate chip cookies to military contractors and everything in between. And we've put this series together to help inform the public on things they really need to look out for when they buy insurance. I think most people are under the impression that insurance is like a number 2 pencil, that it's all the same. So we're here to debunk some of those myths and explain some of the nuances as to what you're buying and what it means and where it can come and bite you in the butt.
Right. So many people out there just have this misconception that insurance covers everything. Today, we're actually going to talk about the umbrella, which everybody thinks that covers their personal stuff, their business stuff, building things, or and umbrella policies are they call them non-standard. So they're very specific to the insurance company. They're specific to whether it's personal or it's commercially written. There's plenty of exclusions we need to look out for. We're not going to take a deep dive into that. We're just going to give you a 10,000-foot view of what the umbrella is, some of the misconceptions of what the umbrella covers, whether personal or commercial.
And I think the most important thing to point out, like you mentioned, is that everybody's under the impression that because it's called an umbrella, that it covers anything and everything, whether it's property, liability. A lot of people are under the impression that those things get commingled, whereas if you have a personal umbrella and you have an at-home business, that your personal umbrella might cover that, or if you have a commercial umbrella and you're doing something at your home, that your commercial umbrella is going to pick up your personal exposure, and that is not the case at all. There's a very thick and distinct line between your personal operations and your commercial operations. And another thing that's interesting before we get into this is people like to commingle the word umbrella with an excess liability policy. And as you'll see as we discuss this, that there's a big difference between an umbrella and what a lot of people believe they're buying is an umbrella, when in fact that's not the case. So I'm going to let you start, John.
Okay, so we have, to Brett's point, there is a difference between umbrella and an excess policy. An excess policy can go over one line of business. So we look at an umbrella as going over, if you're standing under an umbrella, it's going over you, or you can bring other people into that. So an umbrella covers you for, typically it will cover you for your, with respect to personal lines, it goes over the home and the auto. With excess liability, it could just go over either the auto or the home. When we're dealing with commercial umbrellas, they go over the general liability, commercial general liability, and they will also go over the automobile coverage or the employer's liability coverage. That's pretty much it. But we'll get into the intricacies of the umbrella and some of the misconceptions of what an umbrella covers. I mean, I get so many people that call up, and because maybe a commercial umbrella is expensive where a personal lines umbrella is not, a lot of people do not want to buy the commercial umbrella and think their personal umbrella goes over their business. And there's a reason why there's an expensive cost to commercial umbrella and why a personal lines umbrella is so inexpensive. A personal lines umbrella is the best deal in insurance. I mean, personal lines umbrella, as long as you don't have a kid that has 14 DWIs or you don't have 14 DWIs or some crazy stuff violations on your driving record, personal umbrella is the cheapest thing in insurance. So the umbrella typically could run anywhere between $100 and $300 per million of coverage. So I mean that is very inexpensive. Where a commercial umbrella starts at maybe $300 to $500 and could go to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for $1 million in coverage, depending on what we're going over.
Sorry. And to touch on what John was saying, a personal umbrella, again, is a very specific policy. And what that does is, by definition, it goes over your home insurance and your auto insurance. So if you don't own a home or you don't have a home insurance policy, whether it's a condo, a co-op, an apartment renter's policy, which is a home insurance policy, or a straight home insurance policy, then you would not qualify for an umbrella. The same way, and this is a huge problem that we have here up in New York, is that we have some very high net worth clients that own a home, whether it's a condo, specifically in New York City, but they don't own a vehicle and they're looking to get an umbrella insurance, whereas an umbrella would not exist over strictly a home insurance policy. So if you own a $50 million apartment here in New York and you're concerned about your liability exposure and your home insurance policy has a 1 million limit and you'd like that to be a little closer to 10 or 15 million, then you will not be able to get a personal umbrella policy unless there is an auto policy. Obviously, if you don't own an auto, then you wouldn't normally have an auto insurance policy, which is where you'd be required to have what's called a non-owned auto policy, which is a very important thing, especially if you are a high net worth person and you own a lot of assets, you have money, you're worth suing, and you do operate a vehicle, whether it's a rented vehicle, you're borrowing somebody's vehicle, or you lease a short-term lease on a vehicle. So this non-owned auto policy would act as your auto insurance policy to provide liability for you. Again, whether you're renting a car or you're borrowing a friend's car, and in the event that you get sued, you don't feel comfortable with the amount of insurance they have or the insurance that the rental company is giving you. So you would need to institute this non-owned auto policy, and then you'd qualify for an umbrella policy.
Right. Now, remember, with an umbrella policy or an excess policy, there are requirements. So you have to have a certain limit of coverage underneath that. So people try to think they're cute and say, hey, listen, I only want to buy $100,000 worth of liability, but then I want to buy a $5 million umbrella because the umbrella is so cheap, but the underlying coverage may be expensive. So umbrellas have limits. So in many cases, the personal umbrella would require you to carry $300,000 in liability, personal liability on the home, $300,000 in combined single limit on the auto, or $250,000 each accident, each person with a $500 each accident limit. But buying those limits could be expensive. So people everyone tries to be cute and says, well, I'll buy the lowest limit possible and then get an umbrella. And that's not how it works. And, I was recently talking to one of my friends who's a lawyer, and he was telling me that there was a gap, about a $250,000 gap in coverage. So the guy only ended up buying like a $100,000 umbrella, $100,000 in home insurance and $100,000 in auto insurance. And then the requirements on the umbrella was $300,000. So he had a $200,000 gap there. You got to come up with the $200,000 to get to the umbrella. So if you have a $500,000 claim, you got $100,000 paying out on the personal or a home insurance, then you're paying the next $200,000, then the umbrella kicks in. So you just need to be careful to satisfy the limits that are required on the umbrella.
Right. And then on the commercial side, and I've heard this in a million conversations, is business owners will say, well, I had a liability policy, a $1 million liability policy, and I had a $3 million umbrella, but I just let the liability policy cancel because I have the umbrella policy. And like you're saying, the umbrella goes over your liability policy. And the umbrella policy is going to mandate that there's a certain amount of coverage below it. So the liability will take the first million, and then the umbrella says you're required to have $1 million in coverage, and we pick up where that coverage leaves off at starting at $1 million. So like he said in this personal example, on the commercial side, if you have a $2 million claim and you think you have a $3 million umbrella, you think you're covered for $2 million because you have $3 million in coverage. But the reality is the umbrella is going to say, well, we don't know who is covering the first million. That's your general liability. And if you don't have general liability, we're not picking up the phone until you get through the first million. So you're paying that. And that's a pitfall that really need to be concerned about, because a lot of people are under the impression that umbrella covers everything.
Right. And umbrella, many times umbrella, people think that umbrellas goes over property. So, I mean, I have so many cases where people are building a home and they go, well, do you have coverage for the physical structure? They said, well, no, I don't need coverage for physical structure. I got an umbrella. So, I mean, everyone's throwing this thing around like it's, it's the end all be all, but it really, there's very, very strict specifications in order to maintain an umbrella. An umbrella goes over something, right? So, I mean, think of it when you're in the rain. I mean, it's going over your head. If you're standing outside of that umbrella, you're getting wet. So it's got to go over something. So just to recap, these umbrella on the personal side goes over home, personal liability, and it goes over automobile liability. It does not go over property coverage. It's same thing with commercial.
And those two things, just to jump in, those two things are at a minimum. So those are requirements. But clearly, in addition to that, if you own ATVs that you have insurance on, motorcycles, a boat, a jet ski, a secondary home, those can also be included under your umbrella too. So whatever the limits are for those, as long as they meet the minimum requirements for the umbrella can provide additional coverage on top of those.
And one other thing to note that is you just can't do anything you want and think the umbrella covers you. You can't start general contracting the construction of your home and say, hey, I don't need a construction policy because my umbrella goes over it. There's very, very strict things that you're allowed to do. So it's a normal operation that is covered under personal liability, and then the umbrella would follow. So when you have personal liability on your home, it doesn't cover things in business. It doesn't cover a business operation. It wouldn't cover things of you contracting your home and directing and controlling contractors and subcontractors. That's not the purpose of it. So, a personal liability would cover you. You're skateboarding in the park one day and you take out a 90-year-old woman because you're out of control. Or you open up your umbrella and you stab somebody in the eye. Things like that are covered. I mean, obviously, intentional things, if you purposely try to stab somebody in the eye or intentionally try to take out a 90-year-old woman, obviously those things aren't covered. But liability covers things that are accidental and sudden and not intentional. So if you do happen to stab somebody in the eye opening up your umbrella, or you take out a 90-year-old woman skateboarding in the park or bike riding in the park, and those claims have happened, and I've seen those claims, the umbrella would follow the general liability and provide coverage there. But again, if you're building a home or doing other things with, as far as even selling pocketbooks or manufacturing, and we had a claim like this a few years ago where a woman was manufacturing a bench or chairs for children, and she thought her personal liability umbrella would cover that, and it doesn't cover that.
Right. She was manufacturing and selling furniture for infants, and a high chair broke, and the infant had to have surgery. The infant broke her hip, and they tried to put in a claim on their personal policy, and they excluded it, of course, because this was a commercial operation. They were under the impression, oh, we have an umbrella, it covers everything. And the other thing, as John mentioned, that these policies are very non-standard, in that if you read an umbrella policy from 5 different insurance companies, they are all going to be different. They're going to exclude different things. They might cover things. Some of them might pick up exposures that are not covered on the policies below. And there was actually a landmark case several years ago regarding overseas operation of a vehicle that made headlines when Matthew Broderick was involved in an accident overseas, and he figured, oh, I have an umbrella policy, it's covered. And much to his surprise, it wasn't covered. So
I think a similar thing happened to Hulk Hogan too.
So it is important that if you are looking for a personal umbrella or a commercial umbrella, to find out what specifically it covers. And if you have certain exposures and certain things that you're worried about, it's going to be important to shop with several different carriers to make sure that they're providing the coverage specifically that you need, whether it's overseas use of a vehicle, whether or not you can include your children, whether or not children are away at school and those are covered, whether or not the policy is going to be a follow form policy, which is only going to cover the things that the underlying policies cover, whether it's the auto or the home insurance, or it's going to be a drop down and it's going to pick up things that are not covered under your home insurance.
Well, the drop down, so you can have a sub limit on your liability. So if it's under, so let's say that it's required to have 300,000, you may have a sub limit of maybe 50,000 in coverage. Will the umbrella drop down to that $50,000 limit if it's a sub limit of another coverage? Another exposure that a lot of people have is sitting on a board. They're a board of directors, and they have a D&O exposure there. Does the umbrella cover that? There's certain carriers that will cover and provide coverage if you are sued as a director, as long as you're volunteering and not getting paid. So in many cases, the liability, personal liability, does not provide coverage if you make, I believe it's over what, $2,000. So if you're generating more than X amount of dollars on some sort of business, then you would now have personal liability, and therefore the umbrella would not follow. We also have to make sure on umbrella that if you have a commercial general liability policy and you have an umbrella over that the umbrella schedules what lies underneath it. So if it's not properly scheduled underneath it, the umbrella could deny coverage.
Right. And like any other product, whether it's a house or a car or a pair of sneakers, because these policies are all different, you can't look at a $1 million umbrella policy for $500 and another $1 million umbrella policy for $400 and think that you're getting the exact same thing and you're being charged a different price. There's a good chance that the coverages are not the same. So to say, oh, I'm going to purchase this umbrella because it's $100 cheaper, it's like looking at two cars and saying, well, that's the better car because it's less expensive. Because typically if something's less expensive, the chances are it's not doing something or it's missing a feature or a form that you might need that might be important to you. So they are not apples to apples, and the price is typically commensurate with what you're getting.
So I think that's pretty much it. Just to let you know that John and Brett, we are the principals of Castle Rock Agency, www.castlerockagency.com. We both publish a lot of articles, so a lot of these articles can be found on our website, which is www.castlerockagency.com. We are licensed in all 50 states, domiciled in New York City. Again, my name is John Lipton, and this is my brother, Brett Lipton.
Thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue this series, and you can comment below if there's a particular thing that you've got questions about. You can always call or email us. But if there's a certain topic that you'd like to hear more about, then please give us a holler, let us know. Please remember to like and subscribe this video so we keep this up and keep you informed, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody.